Hi there. For this week's discussion, I'm going to first answer the question of considering postmodernism's conception of truth and knowledge and how postmodernists understand the truth, and how they approach their concept of knowledge. So, postmodern thinkers really view the truth as something that is objective, and they really sort of reject the idea of a single truth, right? Because truth they view as being shaped by language, by history, by culture, and it's not something that exists independently of human perspective. Rather, it's something that's produced through a collective sort of discourse among people. Um, an example is Foucault, who argued that knowledge and truth are not neutral, but they're tied to power. And then what is accepted as true often is reflected by who holds the power in society. And we can still see that play out um, in today's day and age. Um, Kind of similarly to their views on truth, they view knowledge as a product of perspectives and narratives. That there are overarching universal explanations of history, science, and morality, but that these grand narratives sort of leave behind a bunch of mini narratives or sort of localized ways of understanding the world. So then knowledge is sort of, instead of being universal, it's fragmented, it's contingent upon where you are, what you're told, what you're taught. Um, and postmodern thinkers can justify their viewpoint, um, in that they criticize other ways of thinking a lot of times as leaving out um, marginalized communities. They challenge the dominance of any one worldview or one group's viewpoint over the others, which really opens up space for a much more diverse perspective on truth and knowledge. Um, so, continuing on with this theme of postmodernism, to answer the second question, I will be using the musical Wicked. I think I discussed it in one of my other posts. It's my favorite musical, but it really ties in uh, to postmodernism incredibly well, in that it really. So, postmodernism is about challenging or sort of reinventing the status quo, I suppose, or subverting what was initially thought to be true and kind of turning it on its head. And this musical is a prime example of that. So it reimagines a world that we were previously introduced to in The Wizard of Oz, and it really challenges the original narrative of truth and identity and power, um, through the characters and the storytelling. So, um, when looking at some significant postmodern elements in Wicked, the most prevalent, I think, is revisionism, right? So it takes what you were initially told about Elphaba, right? She's the Wicked Witch of the West in The Wizard of Oz, but in Wicked, she really becomes more nuanced. She's got layers. She has emotional complexity. Um, it really challenges the assumptions about good and evil, um, where in The Wizard of Oz, she is this villain with no redeemable qualities, but Wicked portrays her as misunderstood. And it really sort of deconstructs the binary of good versus evil. Um, Another um, element of postmodernism in Wicked is kind of a fragmented narrative. So modernism sort of prefers a linear plot, and Wicked doesn't really follow that. So it sort of picks up in the middle of the story. Um, Elphaba is a teenager going off to university, um, and so the musical opens after her supposed death, right? No one mourns the wicked. Good news, she's dead. That starts the musical, and then it jumps back to sort of her teenage years, and doesn't really go into what happened from her childhood up until her teenage years. The movie definitely more so does, but the musical really relies on perspective and memory, um, and it highlights that the truth is open to interpretation, um, especially because in the musical her life is told through other people for much of it. Um, some postmodern themes in Wicked, um, truth, obviously. The musical undermines the idea of a singular truth, in that we, the audience, see how truth is shaped by hearsay, by rumor, certainly by propaganda. Um, it The musical sort of critiques um, mechanisms on how truth is politically motivated. Um, Themes of identity is also in Wicked. Elphaba, her identity is central to the musical's postmodern vibe. Um, she really resists the labels that are put on her as wicked and outcast. She's dangerous, and she really forges her own identity. Um, and it shows how identity is fluid and influenced by social perspectives and knowledge. Um, the musical acknowledges how knowledge is manipulated and how it's contextual, right? The people of Oz believe that Elphaba is wicked because they are told by the wizard that she's done all these terrible things when in fact she hasn't done any of them, but it really aligns with the postmodern idea that knowledge is tied to power. Um, and let me see if I answered all parts of that question. I think I did. Knowledge, power. I think so. Yeah, I hope that works. All right. Thanks for watching.